Hey guys, tonight we're plunging headfirst into one of the darkest corners of Victorian London, why it absolutely sucked to be a prostitute back then. If you think the era was all lace, manners, and polite soirees, prepare for a reality check. It was closer to a never-ending nightmare of coal smoke, poverty, and moral hypocrisy. Before we begin, hit that like button if you appreciate twisted tales of history. Subscribe if you're into bizarre deep dives, and let me know in the comments where you're tuning in from. I want to see who's safely warm while we explore this freezing, filthy world. Let's begin. You wake up in a room so cramped it seems to have been designed by someone who hates personal space. 6 of you share one rickety bed. Near it stands a bucket that's simultaneously your toilet, bath, and water source, depending on how desperate you are. The ceiling drips something foul, the walls ooze dampness, and the rats. They're practically family by now. You've given one of them a name, Mr. Whiskers, but if he tried charging rent, you'd probably have to pay. Hygiene is a myth, or at best an occasional indulgence on payday, assuming payday ever comes. After that stifling room, stepping outside feels like being smothered in a wool blanket. The infamous London pea super fog is no picturesque mist. It's a choking swirl of coal smoke, sewage vapor, decaying horse carcasses, and God knows what else. The infamous London pea super fog is no picturesque mist. It's a choking swirl of coal smoke, sewage vapor, decaying horse carcasses, and God knows what else. Through the haze, the silhouette of factories looms like iron colossi exhaling death. Chimneys belch smoke that mingles with the human exhaust of a city herded by poverty. Every breath you draw tastes of burning coal and rotting refuse, and the damp clings to your bones like a curse. Cough fits rack your body, hacking spasms that shake your ribcage and echo down narrow alleyways. Around you, fellow streetwalkers emerge from tenements, their faces gaunt, cheeks caked in soot, eyes reflecting the same mix of dread and grim determination. You clutch that tin bowl like it's a lifeline, even as you dread each spoonful. Your breakfast ritual is a masterclass in misery. Ginger-stained porridge sits in a battered tin bowl on rickety tables outside greasy spoon stands. Ginger-stained porridge sits in a battered tin bowl on rickety tables outside greasy spoon stands. It's a murky slurry of oat husks, watery gruel, and last week's drippings from a butcher's cart, if you're lucky enough to barter a penny for a serving. Children scamper about, swiping crusts of bread from vendors. Their cries for scraps pierce the fog like tiny sirens. Milk here is a myth. Cows graze upstream, where waste flows unchecked, so the dairy is laced with copper sulfate or formaldehyde to delay spoilage. One sip can land you bedridden for days, sweating bile and blood. Tea, boiled in blackened kettles over open flames, is your closest defense against poisoning. Which is why every ragtag group of women clusters around street vendor stands, clinking chipped mugs in nervous solidarity. Yet for many, this meager repast is just the beginning of a daily gauntlet through the city's open-air markets. Those chaotic sprawlings of muddy stalls where fishmongers shout over the reek of rotting herring. Vegetable sellers hawk squashed turnips and Brussels sprouts still crawling with maggots, and the butcher stands behind a slab of meat veined with pus. You weave between crates of bruised apples, hoping to find one that isn't on the verge of collapse, then more hungrily inspect the ground for fallen potatoes kicked askew by careless horses. At a spice merchant's cart, you sniff the faint hint of cinnamon and cloves. Luxuries so rare, they cost far more than the handful of coppers in your palm. You barter a scrap of lace or an odd glove stuffed in your apron, and the merchant sneers as he measures out a pinch of spice, a morsel that will flavor your porridge or the watery soup you scrounge later. Or perhaps you head to the far less savory corners of the city, to back entrances where promised free meals advertised on tattered posters actually hide clandestine black market canteens. Here, desperate families queue for a bowl of thin stew with floating slivers of turnip and maybe a hunk of gristle if they're lucky. You slip into the line with your empty bowl and barter your last farthing for a scoop of murk that both sustains and shames you. Plates clatter, voices murmur, and the caretaker, a gaunt woman with sunken cheeks, points you toward a wooden bench where rats skitter beneath the framework, sharing crumbs with the waiting throng. As you eat, you can't ignore the whispers of adulteration that haunt every bite. Fraudulent bakers lace bread with chalk or alum to mask stale dough. Coffee merchants dilute grounds with chicory, leaving a bitter bitterness that rims your tongue. Even fish sellers become complicit, sprinkling sand on filleted trout to give it weight, peddling dead cod stored in barrels of brine so long it's as grey as ash. Occasionally, a kindly costermonger tosses out wilted cabbage leaves or battered carrots unfit for pigs, but fit enough to still feed a growling stomach. You pocket those scraps like treasure, rinsing them in a wash of boiled water to dull their earthiness before adding them to a kettle of boiled barley that rations you through the afternoon. Between bites, you survey the crowds, men in patched coats arguing over prices, their breath visible in the chill air, children with hollow cheeks clutching wooden crates, their mothers' arms draped over shoulders to steady them, a blind beggar tapping a tin cup, his single eye sightless yet keen to the slightest tremor of sympathy in your gaze. You glimpse the city's underbelly, policemen leaning against lampposts, nodding to one another before extorting a penny from any woman who lingers too long near a stall. The market's cacophony pulses in your ears, the clink of coins, the clatter of hooves, the murmur of bartering voices. And you realize you're trading more than just scrap for food. You're giving away pieces of your identity with every unwilling transaction. When you finally step away from the stands, the chill of early morning has settled into your bones. You tuck your empty bowl under your arm and absorb the city's gritty atmosphere, the distant clang of church bells heralding an indifferent God, the stink of open gutters that snake through the arteries of Victorian society, the constant reminder that hunger is a blade at your throat and starvation is only a missed turn of barter away. Returning to the tenements, you clutch the remnants of your breakfast like talismans, vinegary gruel sticking to your lips, the aftertaste of metal cutting through stale porridge, and you steel yourself for the next ordeal. By the time you reach the entryway of your lodging, the porridge has long since settled into your stomach, leaving a hollow ache that whispers of future pain. The same children you saw earlier now peer from broken windows, their eyes tracking your passage like spectres of what you might become. And as you climb the creaking stairs toward the single room you share with half a dozen other souls, you remind yourself that this murky ritual of filth and bartered scraps is a necessary preamble to the day's real work. The laundry pits, the factory floors, the alleyway negotiations that define the edge between life and oblivion. After weeks of bitter porridge and sodden straw, illness strikes without warning. The damp seeps into your joints, bringing chills that no scrap of clothing can chase away. The damp seeps into your joints, bringing chills that no scrap of clothing can chase away. Fevers flare, teeth chatter uncontrollably, and you collapse on filthy straw mattresses that breed lice and fleas. No doctor will see you without payment. The parish surgeon charges a week's wages to daub poultices of garlic and onion on your chest, promising relief he rarely delivers. Laudanum offers a fleeting escape. You swallow the amber tincture under flickering lamplight, the opiate wash washing pain into oblivion, until withdrawal claws you awake with cramps so merciless you'd prefer the fever. The workhouse lurks as a spectre of last resort, Its towering walls and iron-barred windows beckon with the promise of food and shelter, but deliver a spiritual and physical prison. Upon entry, you're stripped of your clothes, shaved to prevent lice, and issued a coarse shift dress. Your hair is cropped. A chalked number on your sleeve becomes your only identity. The morning bell summons you to bowls of gritty porridge, so thin it passes through metal ladles like rainwater. Punitive silent meals force you to stand while supervisors roam with whips, cracking the air whenever your movements betray hunger. Forced labor follows. You pick oakum at frayed ropes, inhaling splinters that embed in your skin, or turn treadmills that grind like Sisyphean devices. Both exercises in punishment, not productivity. By the time evening drapes its cold cloak over the sky, your body is a tapestry of pain, bruises from billy clubs, burns from coal, welts from overseers' belts. You might flee the workhouse gates once darkness falls, slipping back into the streets in tattered shifts, only to confront a new gauntlet of dangers. The cycle resets, each phase stacking misery upon misery, until survival is measured not by days, but by hours. Every moment is raw calculus. Weigh hunger against exposure, illness against imprisonment, violence against shelter. Yet through it all, you walk these cobblestones with the fragile hope that tomorrow's suffering might somehow be less unbearable than today's. This relentless grind of grueling labor and ceaseless suffering leaves you with one grim choice: to risk the streets or the horrors of the workhouse. Faced with grueling labor or the fearsome workhouse, you step into another gamble. And so, prostitution becomes a calculated gamble, a cold ledger of pain traded for pennies. At dawn, you steel yourself for one more relentless shift, double knotting the ribbons of your soiled dress and applying a thin layer of chalk dust beneath your eyes to hide dark circles from last night's fears. You learn to size up a client in seconds. The lean dock worker with calloused hands might be rough but predictable. The silk-gloved gentleman in a top hat offers gentler coin but hides knives behind closed doors. Each appointment comes with a silent choreography, muted greetings, brief negotiations, and a constant watch for sudden shifts in tone that signal violence. When bruises bloom or infections flare, you rinse wounds in icy rainwater, bind them with ragged cloth, and move on. Some nights you manage a brisk encounter and pocket a sovereign. Others you stagger home empty-handed, chased by constables demanding bribes or jeered by gangs demanding protection money. You surrender to the calculus of survival. Is it better to endure another man's cruelty or risk the workhouse's iron bars? The dawn hours blur into one another as you navigate the labyrinth of back alleys and side streets, the fog swirling at your calves like a predator closing in. You memorize which lampposts burn longest, which graffiti scratches mark safe corners, and where hungry rats gather to gnaw on discarded morsels. Every coin exchange is a silent pact, sealed with nods and hurried gestures. Pickpockets skulk in crowded doorways, lifting your purse in a heartbeat, while other women are clutched by thugs eager to test your limits. You learn to pivot through shadows, slipping through narrow passages that echo with the clatter of hooves and the low hum of church bells, announcing a God who never intervenes. Unlike their street-bound sisters, high-class courtesans occupy a different battlefield. Plush parlours where velvet cushions and silver trays mask the same dangers. Plush parlours where velvet cushions and silver trays mask the same dangers. They host whisper-soft soirees in townhouse salons, trading theatre box invites and sapphire rings for nights of polite conversation and exquisite tea service. Their beauty routines read like alchemical recipes: mercury masks to bleach imperfections, arsenic tonics to maintain pallor, diets so brutal they court fainting spells. They perfect the art of coded language. A half-closed fan signals a willingness to speak. A tilted teacup hints at more intimate possibilities. A carefully dropped glove announces discretion. Yet beneath their silken veils lies the same dread. Each patron's favor is fleeting, and one misstep, an overlooked wrinkle, a cough from cold damp, can shatter the delicate illusions they carefully craft. Night invites a fresh horror that the darkest dreams can barely contain. In Whitechapel, the fog congeals into thick curtains that swallow cries for help, and rumors of a phantom killer, the Ripper, feed on every whispered rumor. You hear of mutilated bodies found in silent alleys, their lives gutted as casually as fish on a market stall. In Limehouse, opium dens offer a poisoned escape. You inhale sour vapors, sinking into haze where time dissolves and nightmares parade unchecked. Backroom gambling halls glitter with stolen trinkets and falsified banknotes, the clack of dice a cruel soundtrack to hope's betrayal. Every corner hides a blade. Every shiver in the mist might be a prelude to violence. By the time the first timid rays of sunrise pry open closed lids, you count your blessings simply for another heartbeat, bearing scars that mark you as both survivor and prey in a world that never forgave your birth. Desperation drives you into petty crime, lifting coins from unzipped pockets, filching trinkets from market stalls, or running intricate scams on newcomers too starved or naive to notice your ruse. You learn to tail wealthy patrons through busy streets, noting the slight sway of their purses or the distracted glances they cast at children, then slip a hand into a waiting coat to retrieve a purse heavy with silver. Fencing these treasures becomes a nightly ritual. You deliver stolen lockets to dimly lit cellars where greasy men weigh them on crooked scales in exchange for a pittance, eyes gleaming with predatory promise. Crime syndicates offer a twisted protection racket too. For a small fee, they guarantee you safe passage through their districts, until they decide to up the price or test your loyalty with forced recruitment into their ranks. Escape is a myth scribbled on the walls of your mind, always just out of reach. Marriage whispers its siren song, a chance to slip a ring onto a slender finger and vanish from the gutter. But you've heard the tales of men whose rescues end in cruelty, their wives traded from one master to the next when their dowries dry up. Emigration posters boast moonlit harbors and free lands, but you know the price of passage eats every farthing in your pocket, leaving you stranded in foreign ports where language becomes another barrier chained around your neck. Moral crusades lure you with the promise of redemption, pamphlets promising salvation, prayer meetings in candlelit chapels, glossy tracts warning of eternal damnation. But the women who march behind clergy often wield whips of judgment far sharper than any butcher's blade. Meanwhile, hypocrisy takes center stage in broad daylight. Preachers thunder from polished pulpits about the dangers of loose women as they tuck gold sovereigns into sash pockets for midnight assignations. Magistrates who fine you for loitering dine at sumptuous banquets funded by bequests meant for the fallen, bequests that land in the pockets of titled heirs instead. Lace-gloved ladies preside over charity bazaars in opulent drawing rooms, auctioning embroidered handkerchiefs for the cause of fallen women, all while their own investments underwrite the tenements festering just blocks away. Newspapers exploit the spectacle, hawking lurid front-page tales of moral decay alongside discreet classified ads offering discreet companionship for gentlemen of means. Such flagrant double standards tear at the seams of justice. A drunken dock worker faces no charges when found with a girl behind an alley. You're dragged before the bench for a mere whisper of suspicion. Policemen take bribes from both sides, protecting one moment, arresting the next. And judges wrap themselves in moral authority to justify punishments that would leave a barnacle on a warship unscathed. Yet, even in this grim theatre of inequity, sparks of resistance flicker. Clandestine networks of women share information about corrupt officers. Safe houses staffed by reformers offer a sliver of refuge, and blistered hands clutch leaflets urging full decriminalization of their work. Against all odds, they carve out spaces where dignity survives, proving that even in the darkest chapters, solidarity can ignite the flame of justice. The children born to this world bear witness from their first breaths in squalid nurseries. Babies wail in buckets, their limbs curled in hedgehog fashion against cold stone floors. By age 5, many are hustling matches or begging behind shutters, learning early that innocence is a luxury they cannot afford. Some join the ranks of child prostitutes, their small frames yielding little until disease and brutality thin them out, leaving one survivor to carry scars into adulthood. As dusk settles, the temperature plummets. You clutch your scant garments around you, body trembling as winds whip through alley turns like spectral fingers. Fires burn in hearths behind locked doors, sending warmth out through closed windows like a tease. You're reminded again that those who shout loudest about morality often hoard the very comfort they deny. The first client of the evening always brings a fresh wave of dread. Some are gentle, most are not. In polite attire, a gentleman might offer a sovereign for an hour's company, and you adjust your posture, smothering nausea as you fake demure smiles. A fur-trimmed coat can hide the stains of your life. The right hat lets you blend into parks at twilight. But kindness is a facade that cracks under desperation. A misstep, too firm a refusal of a lewd request, too long a hesitation, and restraint shatters. Pain comes swift and unannounced, and you learn to grit your teeth and count the seconds until it's over. Between clients, you stagger back to doorways, pressing your back against cold brick as if it will stop the world from spinning. You ration your coins carefully, 2 pence for bread, a penny for a pint of thin ale that does little more than numb the edge of reality. Rumours swirl of syphilis clinics where doctors needle sores with mercurial ointments that blister skin and scorch flesh. Still, you queue, because worse than disease is hunger. Disease stalks every corner. Syphilis creeps with weeping sores and bone pain until madness steals your mind. Tuberculosis coughs deep in your chest, hollowing your lungs until each breath feels like a wager against oblivion. Underground midwives stitch torn flesh by candlelight, their crude needles often rusted, dragging infection deeper into living tissue. Laudanum becomes both cradle and coffin, a milky promise that dulls agony but dissolves the soul. On rare occasions, a doctor's surgeon gown lights a sliver of hope. A consultation paid in hidden coins leads to anesthetic ether and a chance at clean wounds. But these visits cost half your week's earnings, and many treatments do more harm than good. High-class courtesans navigate a different set of perils. Velvet chambers and silver trays hide the same knives and disease. They sip coffee from fine china and recline on cushions, yet their smiles tremble with the knowledge that youth is a fleeting currency. They slather mercury masks on porcelain skin, swallow tonics of arsenic to bleach away freckles, and starve themselves into corsets that carve grooves into ribs. Their desperation is quieter, but no less lethal. They attend theatre boxes by night, masking the rush of opium as their only escape. Whether you serve silk-gowned patrons or trudge squalid alleys, the law itself becomes another predator. The legal landscape offers little refuge. Under the Vagrancy Act, simply seeking a moment's shelter beneath a dimly lit archway or hesitating by a doorway to avoid the cold can earn you a summons for loitering, a public spectacle at the magistrate's bench, followed by fines that swallow your earnings, or a binding order that threatens jail if you step out of line again. The Contagious Diseases Acts strip away autonomy with ruthless efficiency, You're dragged to grim police wards where doctors, more inquisitors than healers, pry you open with speculums, probe festering sores, and record each tremor of shame in cold ledgers. Resist, and the lock hospitals await, their gates slamming shut on your pleas. Patrols of uniformed constables stalk the streets, billy clubs in one hand and a ledger in the other, ready to extract protection payments that buy nothing but a temporary reprieve from their whips and jeers. Behind closed courtroom doors, judges twist statutes into weapons, punishing women for the smallest slip, an untidy hem, a whispered refusal, while titled patrons glide free, their connections insulating them from consequences. Night invites a deeper terror that eclipses the day's horrors. As dusk spills into gaslit intersections, Whitechapel's fog thickens into a living shroud. Those ancient docks whisper of Jack the Ripper's blade. Rumors of throats opened by surgical precision ignite frantic gossip in tenement parlors. Every footstep echoes like a death knell, every alley a trap. In Limehouse's opium dens, you glimpse the other half of dark survival. A haze of laudanum and chlorodyne coaxes delirium from hardened sailors and broken women alike. Candles sputter beside dented pipes, and the air hums with hushed wagers on the next parlor game. Cards dealt on splintered tables, coins exchanged while oblivious bodies slump in corners, high on escape. Yet beneath the veil of fog, blades slide free from sashes. Silent assailants choose victims by the weight of their purse or the hue of their dress. Each scream is swallowed whole by the mist, each struggle unnoticed until morning reveals torn cloaks and blood-stained cobblestones that shine like garnets in the weak light. When dawn finally pries open closed lids, it exposes the night's toll. Debts scrawled in chalk on doorposts, marks denoting paid-for safety that dissipate with the first weak light. Crime ceases to be choice. It becomes craft honed by necessity. Pickpocketing is an art form perfected on market days in Spitalfields. Your fingers dance along coat pockets, slipping sovereigns and silk handkerchiefs with the precision of a surgeon's scalpel. Families pass down techniques: how to feign sympathy, how to discharge suspicion before a practiced wrist slide purloins a gold watch. Underground auction houses on Backchurch Lane serve as clearinghouses. Trinkets and stolen mementos, lockets encrusted with enamel, brooches of filigree, rope chains glittering with plundered coins, rotate through dimly lit cellars, pried from trembling hands by fences who nod to bribed constables, ensuring the midnight operations continue. Protection rackets shift alliances faster than tides. 1 week, it's the Bermondsey Boys securing dock passage. The next, it's the ruthless Bethnal green cutters carving their territory with burned-in symbols on your flesh if you refuse their levy. Each district's extortioners maintain a ledger of names, tracking who pays and who must be taught a lesson. Refuse once, and you wake to singed flesh and silent threats etched into the doorframe of your lodging. In this deadly calculus of survival, every coin you clutch buys both possibility and peril. Skills you master if you hope to see another sunrise, but risk losing your soul with each transaction. Just when despair seems absolute, small rebellions bloom. Secret reading circles convene in basements, where women exchange pamphlets on women's rights and temperance. Secret reading circles convene in basements, where women exchange pamphlets on women's rights and temperance. An underground network of midwives shares herbal concoctions to soothe aching bodies and abort unwanted pregnancies. These quiet acts of defiance stitch threads of solidarity across a world determined to tear them apart. The path out remains treacherous. Rescue marriages glimmer like false beacons on the horizon. Rumors of sympathetic shoemakers or craftsmen offering a dowry and a promise of security. But more often than not, These alliances collapse as soon as a husband's temper sours or the dowry coffers run dry, leaving you cast back into the streets with the added burden of broken vows and shattered trust. Mistress status before the gentry is another trap, a gilded cage filled with finery and false affection, yet the moment your value dips or a younger face sways a patron's fancy, you're unceremoniously discarded, stripped of titles, trinkets, and the fragile dignity you'd clung to. Emigration schemes dangle visions of new world freedom, but clandestine agents often deliver women into foreign brothels where language barriers become shackles, and the Atlantic's salt-lashed promise dissolves into new cycles of exploitation in downtrodden portside slums. Charity reform homes, pitched as sanctuaries, morph into silent factories, loom rooms humming with the forced labor of those who once begged for bread. Flooring boards echo with the rattle of spinning wheels, and the faint, acrid smell of linen dust permeates every corridor. Behind closed doors, matrons dispense daily rations barely enough to sustain life, all under the guise of moral rehabilitation. Attempts to petition for legal aid or clemency buckle under bureaucratic indifference. Letters sealed and sent to well-meaning philanthropists rarely see return postage, and when replies come, they parrot the same half-hearted promises of proper training and virtuous living, leaving dreams of autonomy little more than paper birdcages. Meanwhile, societal hypocrisy spins its gilded web. Sunday sermons thunder in ornate cathedrals about the sin of the flesh, yet by dusk, the very parishioners kneeling in pews slip coins and whispered invitations to the corridors behind the lamp-lit facades of exclusive gentlemen's clubs. Gentlemen in tailored coats chastise fallen women in the morning, but sign discreet vouchers for private liaisons by twilight. At charity bazaars, aristocratic ladies in silk gloves collect pennies for benevolent causes, oblivious or indifferent to the squalid tenements their own investments perpetuate. Newspapers exploit scandal, selling sensational front-page headlines about moral decay, while featuring coded advertisements for secret brothels neatly tucked between reports on high society weddings. The stark double standards rip at the very fabric of justice. Judges brandish the Vagrancy Act to fine women for loitering, but dismiss cases against male clients for lack of evidence. Policemen who demand protection bribes by day moonlight as brothel enforcers by night, their billy clubs swinging as readily for one coin as another. Legal reformers like Josephine Butler dare to confront Parliament with petitions and speeches that echo through the marble halls of power, demanding repeal of the Contagious Diseases Acts and humane healthcare for the marginalised. Yet for every step these reformers take forward, entrenched patriarchal interests tether progress to indecisive debates, ensuring the laws that punish prostitutes remain steadfast while protection measures stall in committee rooms. From past horrors to present parallels, the legacy of precarity persists. Reflection on survival and modern parallels sharpens the narrative's edge. Consider today's gig economy. Precarious work arrangements where workers must navigate invisible algorithms and unpredictable demand, often lacking basic protections. Much like Victorian streetwalkers gambling body and soul for meagre fare, modern-day freelancers and platform workers barter time and expertise for incomes that vanish at the click of a screen. The health risks in clandestine clinics find echoes in today's underfunded public health systems, where marginalised individuals struggle for access to care and face stigma for seeking assistance. And the legal double standards persist. Sex workers continue to face criminalisation and social ostracisation in many regions while clients slip free. A haunting reminder that empathy and equality remain battles yet to be fully won. If you're still listening and snuggled under your blankets, now's the time to gently click that like button. because we're plunging into Victorian London's underbelly, where disease, despair, and diabolical medicine rule the roost. Ever heard of consumption, aka tuberculosis? In Victorian London, it wasn't just a disease, it was a silent stalker drifting through the gaslit alleyways of Whitechapel and the creaking tenements of the East End. You wake before dawn to the caw of ravens above the Thames, lungs tightening as you draw in a ragged breath of freezing morning air. Your cough is no polite rasp, it's a savage blade, slicing through bronchi until your ribs protest in splintering agony. Each hack steals another fragment of breath and another shard of hope. Stripes of golden sunlight have little meaning when your mattress, piled atop swollen straw, has turned into a swamp of night sweats so hot they could sear flesh. In these overcrowded lodging houses, where 12 souls share a single room, you learn to fear every breath, every exhalation of the person beside you. A single cough in the corner can spark a domino of death. Cries of panic echo off soot-stained walls, and by afternoon, funeral pyres glow on street corners. Mothers bind their children's faces with scraps of linen, hoping any barrier can hold back the invisible killer. And fathers, worn as the bricks they lean against, hack into the night until dawn drags them back into life's misery. The Board of Guardians tracks the spread with cold statistics. How many new cases in Southwark this week? How many funerals in Islington? But for you, it's a personal nightmare written in each laboured breath. But tuberculosis was only the overture. By the 1840s, London's stench-choked streets faced a new terror: cholera. Imagine the winding mud lanes of Bermondsey and Lambeth, lined with squat cottages whose privies emptied directly onto the ground, waste running unchecked into rutted roads. Spasms erupt in your gut like a punch to the solar plexus, and every precious drop of water, drawn from a communal pump at dawn, is as lethal as arsenic. The disease strikes without discrimination. You might be a dock worker who downed a pint of ale to ward off the cold, or a destitute housemaid resting between laundry shifts. Within hours, the victim is reduced to a brittle husk, skin puckered like an old walnut. The first sign is the gurgle in the belly, a trickle of terror that blossoms into full-blown horror. Diarrhea violent enough to hollow limbs, vomiting that expels every meal ever tasted. Horse-drawn ambulances, once symbols of progress, now careen through narrow lanes, their wooden wheels flinging filth as mourners panic and scatter. Men in blue coats beat drums for the next cholera cart, voices hoarse from shouting names. "Cholera wagon, catch it quick." They offer no mercy, only the promise of a slab in the fever shed. Children orphaned overnight roam the streets, clutching ragged ribbons that once adorned Sunday best dresses, their bellies distended by dehydration. In parish poorhouses, bodies slump in rows on wooden benches, eyes fixed on the soot-black ceiling, as though waiting for rescue that never comes. City officials attempt to map the devastation, dotting cholera cases on oversized charts, drawing circles around pumps at Broad Street and Hanover Square, hoping to trace the invisible hand of death. But mapping means little to the living, who scramble for the scarce clean water pumped from deep wells in the suburbs, risking long walks through fog and mud just to fill a single bucket. Even then, those wells might be contaminated. No one knows until the gurgles begin again, a prelude to collapse. Meanwhile, the flush of the toilet was a century away. Privies overflowed, cesspits leaked, and the Thames, a mighty artery of trade, became a sewer for slaughterhouse offal and household filth. The air above the river turned into a ghastly perfume. Any venturing boatman cursed the stink that rose from the water, as white caps of effluent bobbed like ghostly reminders of a poisoned city. In the back alleys, rumours of cures spread as feverishly as the disease. Laudanum, an opium tincture, was sold from dim windows, promise to hush the screams and dull the pain. You down it in a cheap chemist's, welcome the warmth, then slump in doorway alcoves, drifting between sickbed misery and dozing near death. Overdose was so common that alley cats and scavengers learned to avoid slumped forms, sniffing for the sweet scent of opiates still clinging to ragged coats. Physicians brandished mercury pills, glittering promises of a silver cure, but silver turned deadly. Jaws rotted from within, gums blackened, and madness danced in fever eyes. Humoral doctors preached leeches and bloodletting in candlelit parlours, draining you until eyes dulled and strength bled out with each crimson drop. Leeches, often reused between patients, spread gangrene like wildfire, turning small cuts into horrific ulcers that gummed flesh to bone. In the grandest hospital wards, charity provides a bed, if you can pray well enough. Hemp sheets group patients side by side. Every cough resonates like a gong, announcing another lost soul. Priests roam the aisles, ledger in hand, striking names off lists once salvation is deemed too late. Meanwhile, quacks hawk bottles of patent medicine. Dr. Radcliffe's miracle elixir, peddled at a guinea each, laced with arsenic that transforms breathing bodies into brittle, ghostly caricatures. At home, you resort to folk remedies born of desperation. Vinegar vapours simmer in chipped kettles, fogging your tenement like a makeshift apothecary, because nothing says clean like steam from vinegar and water. You strap pungent onions to your throat, their layers pressing against your skin as if to ward off the very air itself. In truth, you're just clinging to any superstition that might buy a few more breaths. Midwives, those under-the-radar saints of the slums, concoct secret poultices from crushed yarrow, plantain leaves, and rancid lard, spreading the greasy salve across festering sores with trembling hands, hoping that nature's sting can outmatch man's poison. They muffle coughing fits with poulticed rags tied around temples. It's no miracle cure, but it mutes the worst sounds. When these humble cures fail, as they often do, you dip into darker alchemy. A whispered name floats through the alleys, laudanum, an opium elixir brighter than any street lamp's glow. You clink coins at a chemist's window, drink the amber syrup until your chest hums, and float between fever dreams and alleyway slumber. Overdose or relief, it's sometimes hard to tell the difference. Next on the menu, mercury pills, the so-called quicksilver cure. You chew the bitter capsules under flickering candlelight, grit through the nausea, and feel your jaw falter as rot creeps upward. Tongues blacken, madness blooms in fevered delirium, and still you pop another pill, hoping this time for salvation. Then there's bloodletting. Doctors in threadbare coats slice a vein, drape leeches across your skin, and watch your life drain away in crimson beads. Those leeches are never fresh-feeling, oily, reused, carriers of infection that turn small wounds into gangrenous nightmares. The stench of iron and decay mingles in your nostrils as you lie on a tossed heap of straw, every drop of blood a gamble between harmful purge and fatal loss. If you're lucky enough to reach a charity hospital's front steps, you must first pass the moral inquisition. Kneel and recite psalms to prove your worthiness. Stumble, and you sleep on the floor amidst rats that sneak beneath the blankets. Inside, ward walls drip with condensation and sorrow. Cots crowd the rooms so tight you can feel your neighbour's ragged breath on your neck. Priests patrol like wardens, ledger in hand, striking your name if you falter in prayer or falter in faith. Food arrives in metal bowls, watery gruel that barely stains the tongue. A hymn recital might earn you bread, but the real currency is piety. Even here, charlatans peddle false hope. At the dispensary window, patent medicines line dusty shelves. Dr. Radcliffe's miracle elixir, guaranteed to expel fever if you survive the arsenic-laced nightmare. Bottles cost a guinea. Years of wages slipped through trembling fingers for a pint of damning liquid. You swallow it down, eyes watering, heart pounding, praying this devil's brew is kinder than death. Back in your tenement, the final recourse is drawn from the deep well of folk belief. You hang bunches of burned sage in the doorway to purify the miasma. You drink cups of nettle tea, boiled for hours to strip dirt and foul spirits from your entrails. You wrap willow bark tight around sprained ankles, an anti-inflammatory gift from the hedge, though your knees feel as brittle as the wood. Through every tincan cough, every trembling hand that lifts a chalice of murky water, through every drop of laudanum-induced oblivion, every mercury-fueled hallucination, every bandage soaked with infection, you press on. These are the rituals of desperation. They bind you to life, however tenuously. Victorian London's cruelest irony is that the more you seek salvation, the deeper you sink into the mire of suffering. Yet still, you swallow hope, line by bitter line, in the name of surviving one more sunrise. Meanwhile, the Thames, London's so-called lifeline, has turned into a toxic stew of humanity's waste and industry's offal. Picture barges once laden with spices and cotton, now scraping against water stained black and green, the surface slick with grease and sewage. Clogs clop along the embankments as riverfolk haul buckets, only to curse the brackish water that coats their skin with a stench no amount of scrubbing can remove. Human waste and slaughterhouse guts swirl downstream, mingling with dye pit's chemical runoff, forming eddies that glimmer with the sheen of rot. Cholera, that relentless bloodhound, pads along every bank. Bodies bob, faces turned skyward, as if gasping for the sweet caress of air that betrayed them. Children lean over rushing currents, muttering prayers for the bucket's next fill, unaware that salvation may lie in bottles hoarded by apothecaries. When a cluster of cases erupts near a pump, you'll see thick ropes and iron chains slapped across its spout, a medieval barricade against an invisible enemy. The spectacle draws gawkers in droves, merchants' sons pressed against smudged notices, eager to catch a glimpse of death's handiwork. Mourning mothers huddle beyond the chains, clutching rag dolls as though they were talismans. Then there are the bathhouses, the flimsy promise of cleanliness perched on the river's edge. Every other fortnight, you jostle with costermongers and chimney sweeps in a press for entry. Iron gates groan, admitting hundreds into fetid pools where the water's surface ripples with soapy bubbles and the detritus of 1,000 bodies. Steam rises in coughing plumes, fogging mirrors and costing you a soap coupon earned through relentless toil. Missed your ration? Then you're at the mercy of black market scalpers hawking bars of rancid lye soap for prices that could feed you for days. In that convulsing mass of human flesh, every splash echoes the futility of hygiene, your scrubbing brushes scraping gravel rather than filth. And then the summer of 1858 descended, the great stink, transforming London into a gas chamber of its own design. Heat fused with sludge, rising in waves until even the stone lions of Westminster writhed in disgust. Parliament's marbled halls reeked so vilely that MPs scattered, fanning the air with gilt hand fans as if swatting away a plague of locusts. The uproar spurred a crusade. Enter Joseph Bazalgette, engineer extraordinaire who tunnelled beneath feet out of public sight and installed brick-arched sewers grand enough to reroute rivers. The West End rejoiced as carrion-coated waters receded, but beyond the grand bridges, in pockets of Hackney and Bethnal Green, half-collapsed pipes still wept filth onto unpaved roads. Sewer grates gurgled their pathetic weep, and puddles formed miniature poison lakes that refused to drain. By winter, the river's fetor froze over, forming a glittering sheet of toxic crystal that cracked under boot heels. Ice-encrusted discarded toys and broken crates, and those who crossed the frost-bound Thames braced for the hidden sludge lurking beneath. Carriage wheels churned through slush, spraying frozen effluvium onto skirts and coats. Even as new sewers snaked beneath the bustling streets, committees debated reparations and budgets in ornate halls, far removed from the plague-ridden banks. Politicians sipped gin behind shuttered windows, voicing sympathy in polished tones, while urchins drowned in what they once called life's wellspring. All the while, the river's pulse continued, a murmur of death and defiance, a symbol that progress can't outrun its own refuse. Victorian London's watery artery carried cargo and corpses alike, a testament to how easily a city's bloodstream can turn poisonous when neglect and greed flush society's sins into its heart. Speaking of smoke, let's talk smog, London's grey blanket of despair. Picture dawn breaking over factory chimneys, belching clouds of acrid coal dust that stain rooftops in layers of soot. You draw breath and feel your lungs seize, corridors of your throat closing like clamshells under siege. Children learn to hold their breath as they scamper to school, faces pressed against damp scarves that do little to filter out the airborne ash. Women in drafty tenements stir stew pots by hearths fueled with the cheapest coal, each flake of blackened ember a curse on their health, settling on floorboards like an unshakable doom. The Great Smog of 1873 didn't tiptoe in. It barreled through like an uninvited guest, bursting through windows and doors, turning streets into obscured tunnels. Carriages ploughed blindly forward, their horses lunging at nothing, riders shouting curses at phantom obstacles. You clutch your cloak tighter, peering through the gloom, every step a treacherous gamble over unseen puddles and curbs. Lamplighters, robots of a dying light, doused their lamps early, terrified that the gas might ignite the volatile air. The smell was a heady mix of burning coal, decomposing street refuse, and sulfuric tang that made your eyes water until they swelled shut. Those who ventured out described a world reduced to shapes and sounds, the clink of a cider jar, the distant wail of a child, the hoofbeats of a load-laden cart, phantoms in a silent theatre of smothering gloom. By the time the massive pall finally lifted, over 200 souls lay claimed by the haze. Graves in churchyards overflowed, and parishes scrambled to bury the dead before the next smog swept through. Yet even that nightmare was eclipsed by the ongoing coughs and wheezes that shook survivors for months after. Every exhalation, a razor-edged reminder of fragility. Childhood in this madhouse is a cruel joke. Little girls and boys, barely old enough to toddle, find themselves thrust into a world of soot and sweat. Match girls stand behind rickety stalls, striking white phosphorus-coated sticks to light candles and pipes, a necessity that burns flesh and bone. Their fingertips glow momentarily in the dusk, but soon abscesses bloom, sculpting their jaws into grotesque art they cannot escape. You might glimpse one wandering past your lodging, eyes empty, jaw stiff, spine hunched under the weight of pain and poverty. And then there are the chimney sweeps, toddlers wedged into narrow flues, their bodies sliding inch by inch through shafts coated in decades of creosote and tar. Each descent feels like a plunge into oblivion, lungs choking on carbon dust until every breath tastes of bitter doom. Soot coats their lungs like cement, and their cries, trapped within brick walls, echo in silence until they emerge clutching blackened faces and trembling knees. School is no sanctuary. Ragged schools, funded by minimal parish alms, open their doors to teach the Lord's Prayer. But as soon as the lesson ends, children are marched off to peddle rags in the docks or haul baskets of coal up winding stairs. Each day extremizes their tender limbs. Hands blister over rough wooden handles. Backs arc beneath burlap sacks. Eyes strain in dim lamplight, while every child dreams of the playgrounds they'll never know. Yet, amid the smoke and misery, humanity flickers like a guttering candle. Alleyways transform into makeshift clinics, where midwives and sisters move like phantoms, sharing crusts hidden in shawls and passing whispered warnings of constables who demand bribes instead of protection. In these back lanes, you learn of illicit infirmaries, tiny rooms beneath crumbling stairs, furnished with torn rags for bandages and candles pilfered from morgues. Each wounded soul is ferried there by silent networks, men and women who risk their necks to slip food, medicine, and hope. By nightfall, pubs become sanctuaries, a brutal contrast to the reeking streets. For a penny, you claim a pint of thin ale and trade nightmares for raucous camaraderie. The board walls ring with laughter and laments. Penny dreadfuls pass hand to hand, their lurid tales of horror offering a thrilling detachment from one's own woes. In dim corners, reformers slip in, shoulders hunched against the draft. They distribute pamphlets on labour rights, health advice, and plans for mutual aid societies. Each leaflet is folded into a hidden pocket, a seed of rebellion implanted in calloused hearts. Fortress-like lodging houses sometimes double as safe houses. A knock at the back door, a whispered password, and you're ushered into a room where a pot of tea simmers and a voice reads from obscure pamphlets on sanitation and suffrage. These clandestine gatherings are lifelines, proof that even in the choking haze of Victorian London's worst, compassion and defiance can illuminate the darkness. As the embers in your hearth wane and you shroud yourself in threadbare blankets, remember this: survival isn't merely a matter of endurance, it's a daily act of solidarity, a testament to the unyielding human spirit that clings to hope even when the air itself conspires to snuff it out. But no nightmare rivals the Contagious Diseases Act of 1864, Victorian morality's cruelest contrivance. Touted as a shield for soldiers, it instead lashed streetwalkers in chains of shame and surveillance. Overnight, women who had survived cholera's onslaught and soot-choked alleyways found themselves cornered by the state. Registrars demanded their names, descriptions, and addresses, branding them infective on official lists that clients never touched. The moment you registered, your freedom slipped through iron gates. Every month, an inspection date loomed over you like a dagger. Imagine queuing in drafty police wards at dawn, wraps clutched tight against the cold. Gas lamps flickered overhead as constables herded you through narrow corridors, eyes assessing your every curve and crease. Then came the strip searches, public rituals of degradation that unfolded beneath searing gaslight. You stood naked under the leer of uniformed officers, your body displayed in its most vulnerable state. Speculum exams followed, metal instruments slick with oil, probing places meant for trust and care, each twist and turn a fresh incision on your dignity. Medical students observed from behind folding screens, eyes bright with clinical curiosity, but devoid of compassion. The walls echoed with soft sobs and the creak of boards under shaking feet. Beyond the inspections, everyday life became a gauntlet of fear. Handkerns provided testimony to corrupt officers who labelled women repeat offenders for missing an inspection or refusing an exam. A single line scratched by a magistrate could mean forced confinement in lock hospitals, isolated wards for the infected, where treatment was synonymous with punishment. There, narrow beds stood in grim rows, separated only by thin curtains that did nothing to muffle cries. Meals arrived on tin trays, watery broth and stale bread that nourished nothing but resentment. Guards locked iron doors at dusk, the clang of hinges a lullaby of entrapment. Resistance flickered in the hearts of the condemned. In dingy back rooms, Josephine Butler and her Ladies' National Association waged an insurgent campaign. Butler's voice, sharp as broken glass, cut through Parliament's hushed corridors, essays, speeches, and petitions that decried the act's inhumanity. Women scribbled hidden graffiti on tenement walls, phrases like "no more shame" scrawled in charred chalk. Dangerous meetings convened under the cloak of night, where radicals passed secret petitions folded into cabbage leaves or sewn into coat linings. Networks of solidarity formed, connecting streetwalkers to sympathetic doctors who offered clandestine clinics beyond police reach. In whispered code, these brave souls offered each other havens with garden gates painted code word green, safe houses stocked with herbal salves to treat post-examination injuries, and pamphlets outlining rights and avenues for legal recourse. By 1886, after decades of struggle, the Contagious Diseases Act was repealed, at least on paper. Politicians jubilated in candlelit galleries, declaring victory for decency and reform. Yet the repeal was riddled with loopholes. Local authorities retained the power to enforce medical surveillance under other pretexts, and many constables simply rebranded the inspections under vagrancy or disorder charges. The ledgers remained, ghostly reminders of a law that had carved itself into the bodies and psyches of thousands. The echoes of that dark era still reverberate today. Modern debates over sex work regulation, public health mandates, and bodily autonomy unfold under the same uneasy truce between state power and personal freedom. We argue about safe consumption sites, stigma-free healthcare, and the right to self-determination, battles that trace their lineage back to those gas-lit wards and clandestine safe houses. So, what have we learned? That criminalizing survival does not eradicate vice. It perpetuates cycles of shame, violence, and vulnerability. That medical systems built on secrecy and paternalism breed distrust and evade accountability. And that regardless of century or setting, solidarity and resistance spring from the same impulse, to claim humanity in a world determined to strip it away. Now, as you draw a breath in your own climate-controlled sanctuary, spare a thought for those women who faced unspeakable horrors for daring to live. It's time for the final descent into Victorian London's secret war between its streetwalkers and its gilded courtesans. Here's the stage. Two parallel worlds under the same gaslit sky. On one side, streetwalkers, tens of thousands of them by mid-century, navigate razor-wit back alleys, unlicensed and unprotected, gambling each sunrise on the promise of a sovereign. On the other, high-class courtesans glide through silk-draped salons, 50 or so elite women whose fortunes swell to dozens of sovereigns each month, yet whose autonomy crumbles under legal and social pressures. This is a story of survival and subjugation intertwined by law. The Vagrancy Act, snatching freedoms for one group. The Contagious Diseases Acts, enforcing surveillance on the other. As a streetwalker, eking out a precarious living in London's overcrowded lodging houses, you know dawn is both enemy and chance. Before first light breaks, you haul yourself from the narrow plank bed, ribs still aching from yesterday's fray, and press your face to soot-stained shutters. In the half-glow of gas lamps, you count bodies draped like ragged coats over iron posts, casualties of yesterday's hunger or violence. You swallow a raw cough, pull on boots that have traipsed through every filth-soaked alley, and lean close to your sisters, voice hushed. Which corner's quietest for police? Which block pays in sovereigns before breakfast? This is no idle whisper. It's the gamble of your life. Every sunrise brings a fresh roll of fate. A single misstep costs you more than coins. It costs your skin or your freedom. In the maze of East End alleys, streetwalkers stake their silent claims beneath flickering gas lamps. A threadbare ribbon tied to a wrought iron gatepost signals sanctuary. A frayed black cord twined around a low window warns of fresh constable patrols. Coal, pilfered from the flickering hearths of unsuspecting households, transforms into shared warmth. Luxury traded in hunks of steaming porridge passed from cracked bowl to trembling hand. Boots, once sturdy leather, now patched with mismatched scraps and waterproofed with oiled cloth, slurp through ankle-deep sludge that bites at bone. As twilight suffocates the streets, lookouts perch on sagging window ledges, tapping candle flames in silent Morse. 3 flickers for police sweep, 4 for a clear path. Cunning weaves through every breath of air in those fetid alleys, an instinct honed by necessity and fear. You learn, in the dim pre-dawn hush, how to twist your silhouette against crumbling walls, how to read the cadence of footsteps echoing in narrow passages. A single misstep, eyes meeting a patrolman's too well-trained gaze, means a swift drag through back streets, a handshake greased with silver at a police station, and bruises fresh enough to bleed under moonlight. Your lungs memorize the cold grip of fear, the shallow inhale that precedes a heated confrontation, the lung-shredding gasp when the bargain sours. And then there's the art of misdirection. A cough, calibrated by gritty lips and eyelash shadows, sends predators skittering back into the shadows, believing they've startled contagious sickness when in fact they've walked away from fierce survival. Shawls dyed in drab wool, colours borrowed from old uniforms, become your shield. You fold them thrice around your shoulders, layering them like armour against wind and sorrow. Beneath loose hems, pockets sewn from the lining hide more than coins, cracked lockets, tiny vials of laudanum, prayer cards thumbed until they're frayed and worn. When rain drips through holes in the roof, you unwrap these shawls to stave off damp that can carry fever straight into your bones. The ledger of deprivation is written in bricks and mortar. In a fissure beneath your bunk, you place farthings, glinting fragments of hope, tucked behind a shard of plaster. When hunger gnaws or the gallows of debt tighten their grip, you dig them out, the coins cold enough to remind you of every coin ever lost to pickpockets or greedy racketeers. Meanwhile, beyond the boundary of grime, high-class courtesans awaken to another brand of cunning. They lie in down-filled pillows above polished oak floors, yet their needs are no less urgent. At their dressing tables, rosewater sifts through air, blending floral sweetness with sharp undertones of fear and expectation. Distilled violet water beads on polished mahogany, a perfume that conceals calculation. Every gesture, every glance at silk threads is a rehearsal for the day's performance. Their makeup mirrors demand precision. Eyelash dyes imported from Paris promise fluttering allure, but each stroke carries economic weight. A missed eyelash can translate to a tarnished reputation. Hair pomades, melted from Italian ores to Western salons, hold pin-straight curls that signal youth and promise. Beneath the vanity table, false-bottom trunks guard their secrets. Not just wax-sealed ledgers tallying debts for Parisian gowns, but lists of patrons' names coded in cipher, each a credit or a threat. Footmen in pepper and salt uniforms orchestrate a ballet of deception. They deliver forged invitations, a lecture at a private botanical society, a reading at a scholarly salon, a luncheon at a foreign embassy, all designed to mask trysts and legitimize absences. The footmen memorize these alibis by rote, passing them off to doormen and chauffeurs alike, each lie calibrated to protect their mistress's hollowed freedom. In private parlours, courtesans curate alliances as a gardener tenders rare orchids. An art collector straight from Mayfair studies watercolour landscapes, offering compliments that smell of easy coin. A diplomat from Vienna glides in, speaking of future favours in hushed tones. Courtesans, draped in silk taffeta so luminous it catches candlelight like liquid glass, measure each smile against the glint in a man's eye, a promise or a trap. Gloves become a language. White gloves at midday speak of discretion and willingness. Black gloves, rejection and retreat. These silent symbols ripple across salons, a wave of fabric, a pause in conversation, a hushed interpretation among savvy courtiers. Private recitals elevate the stakes, a cello's deep lament, a soprano's piercing trill, each note a contract sealed in flesh and melody, more binding than any signed parchment. But this elegance is a mask. Behind it, courtesans learn their own survival arts. They cultivate alliances with seamstresses who can repair not just gowns, but reputations. They bribe head clerks at private clubs to erase unpaid tabulations. They whisper to a sympathetic baker to reserve a loaf at dawn, ensuring that, beneath their taffeta, hunger doesn't stain their composure. Yet, for both streetwalker and courtesan, each day is a strategic game of chess played on shifting boards. A stray word overheard, a clandestine rendezvous poorly timed, a purse openly displayed. Any can upend the delicate balance between pleasure and peril. Both sides learn to navigate dangers with equal dexterity, one by mastering the dark folds of alleyways, the other by manipulating the flicker of candlelight in opulent halls. This is the dance of power and survival, where cunning is more precious than coin, where every breath could be leveraged or stolen. And as dusk dissolves into the pallor of night, both women, one in rags, one in silk, clutch their moves like talismans, ready to play the next hand in a city that demands brilliance and exacts a heavy price for any misstep. But even gilded cages creak under relentless scrutiny. Footmen in pepper and salt livery map every sortie, memorizing the pattern of lantern glows in hallways and the soft click of satin at the door. A single offhand whisper from a displeased patron can twist into a rumor that shatters a courtesan's reputation faster than scandal sheets can catch wind. She finds her carriage unhitched, her letters unopened, her trust dissolved in a moment's cruelty. Meanwhile, society's gaze plays a dangerous game of split screen. By day, temperance societies in pristine white collars march down cobblestone routes, denouncing streetwalkers as the plague of London's moral fabric. By night, their leaders slip into velvet-draped brothels, hand over gold sovereigns for the very flesh they condemn, cloaking hypocrisy in hush money. In stately Parliament halls, debates on vice reform spill formal resolutions onto paper, only to disappear into private chambers, replaced by soft laughter behind closed doors and the clinking of crystal flutes. The pen is as potent as any sword. The press-printing presses churn out penny dreadfuls, splattering lurid tales of streetwalker descent into madness across gaslit corners. Grotesque caricatures, hollow-eyed warnings, morality pinched to sensational extremes. Flip open a society magazine, and you'll find pastel portraits of courtesans in pearlescent gowns, an image of elegance that erases every bruise, every whispered fear, every threadbare moment beneath a gas lamp. Crime is the common thread, weaving through velvet and rags alike. Some courtesans serve as intermediaries in opium smuggling rings, slipping bottles concealed in satin linings past pale customs officers. Others become couriers of secrets, coded dispatches for foreign embassies, seduction a veil for espionage. When constables dare approach, a whispered invocation of their aristocratic habeas charm reduces warrants to gossip, while private arbitrators collect hush money like weekly rent, burying scandals beneath layers of silken discretion. Night's toll runs deeper than broken bones and empty pockets. It saturates the mind with tremors that no candlelight can soothe. PTSD here isn't a medical term. It's the primal scream echoing through every alley when footsteps fall too close behind. You startle at the creak of floorboards, your heart stuttering as if caught in a noose. Nightwalkers and courtesans alike bear the weight of sleepless vigils. Eyes dart at shadows, vision doubling with spectres of past predators. You learn to steel yourself against dizziness and the sharp bite of anxiety, clutching a ragged shawl as if it could anchor you to the present. When dawn finally glimmers, muscles still tense from imagined assaults, you reach for gin, vodka for the courtesans, cheap spirits for the street sisters, smooth warmth flooding numb veins. Pray you have enough laudanum to quiet the chattering demons in your skull. Pray you can ration that opium tincture, for dependence is a dark twin to disease. Each swallow of alcohol or bitter tincture is a wager, relief at the cost of tomorrow's fortitude. In dim, subterranean sanctuaries, cellar rooms rented off the radar, support circles flicker like fragile lanterns in the gloom. You swap tincture recipes, a splash of clove oil in tea to stanch trembling, the bitterness of wormwood boiled to dull the edge of panic, a dab of lavender poultice to lull quaking limbs. Breathwork instructions pass in hushed syllables. Inhale through the nose, hold until stars paint the ceiling. Exhale sorrow in 3 measured counts. Hymns, stripped of doctrine, morph into lullabies for adult orphans, shared refrains that bind battered hearts in a fragile choir. Penny readings grow sacred. For a farthing, you clutch a spine-chilling serial, letting madcaps and murderesses on yellowing pages offer catharsis. When the public houses darken, voices rise in communal shivers, thrills stolen from lived reality, channeling fear into collective exhilaration. In these charged gatherings, laughter flickers through tears, forging bonds more potent than law's long arm. Ink and flesh unite in the artistry of resistance. Tattooist midwives kneel beside swollen beds, etching anchored hearts and maiden voyage dates on damp, fevered arms. Each mark sears a story of survival, of borders crossed, of debts paid in blood and hope. Brothel walls, once blank slates of shame, now bear clandestine poetry, scrawled verses in coal dust and sawdust, a riot of words that sanctify these spaces as cathedrals of defiance. In the hush of night, you learn to navigate the law itself. Pamphlets slip between linen folds, leaflets explaining the Contagious Diseases Acts in plain vernacular, telling of riders to the Vagrancy Act, empowering you to defy extortion with legal citations. Torrent of whispered clarifications swirl. Recite the exact section on consent, demand a public hearing, flaunt the right to a habeas corpus writ borrowed from burials of hypocrites. These ribbons of knowledge cascade through the underworld, each mind sharpened into a blade of awareness. Collective aid networks flourish in obscurity. You cradle a neighbor's child through fevered chills, trading porridge for infant breaths. You smuggle half a loaf to the locked ward, pressing coins into a matron's hand for medicine. You gather with a handful of sisters, pooling pennies to hire an underground midwife who stitches wounds with leftover suture silk, her hands gentle as prayer. Solidarity ceremonies mask themselves as social calls, a birthday feast disguised as a pancake supper, complete with stolen sugar and stolen laughter. Candlelit lessons unfold in borrowed parlours, literacy lessons taught by a repentant schoolmaster, arithmetic by a gentle seamstress, the alphabet rising in hopeful crescendo. Each letter learned is a weapon against erasure. Some carve clandestine cash savings clubs, 5 pence each payday, locked box in a sympathetic pawnbroker's vault, a collective nest egg for hospital fees. Others form mutual insurance circles. A woman falls to cholera. Her sisters rally funds to reclaim her from the fever shed. Another breaks a leg in a factory. The circle covers the doctor's bribes so she can walk again. These acts of defiance bloom in the soil of cruelty. Each shared remedy, every whispered law, every verse scratched on barnacled walls is a stitch in a tapestry of resilience that no statute can unravel. As dawn's first light fractures through dusty panes, these women rise, marred, battered yet unbowed, each heartbeat a testament. When the world deals cruelty, solidarity remains their fiercest armor. And then, the ledger of reality unfolds in brutal arithmetic. Streetwalkers claw together 3 to 5 shillings a day, scraps of coin won between the hush of alleyways and the glare of lanterns. Those shillings must stretch across every hunger pang. A penny buys a crust of coarse bread. A few broken biscuits grant fleeting satiety. A sixpence might coax steam from a pot of thin stew, thick with turnip, but warm enough to chase the chill from bone. Yet coins slip from faded purses, like water through fingers. 2 shillings monthly, devoured by tenement rent in drafty lodging houses, where roofs leak and stairs groan under shared weight. Daily bribes for police protection siphon another shilling or two, an unspoken tax for polite survival. A broken night's shift might leave you penniless by morning, forced to scavenge scraps or beg beyond the butcher's cart. Courtesans tally a different ledger, 20 to 30 sovereigns each month, glimmering gold pressed into palm by titled patrons. Yet half vanishes before silk touches skin. 5 to 10 sovereigns slip into furred muffs of milliners who stitch corsets and cloaks. Another slice slides through bankers' hands to secure discreet letters and hush money. Footmen demand 6pence per carriage dispatch. Private club subscriptions nibble at your fortune in weekly instalments of 2 to 3 sovereigns. Lodgings in townhouses cost 10 to 15 shillings per week, an invisible burden tucked beneath velvet rugs and silk drapes. A single scandal's ripple can demand a sovereign for legal indemnity or a night's payment to a discreet mediator in powdered wig and whiskers. Beyond the surface, figures lie hidden costs that pocket counting cannot capture. Streetwalkers pay in flesh. Bruised bodies call for medics who accept 1 to 2 shillings per bandage, or else resort to unlicensed bone setters, charging a guinea in secret. Add to this the furtive purchase of laudanum vials, 3pence a dram, and the occasional leech doctor demanding 6pence per leech, and your daily tally rapidly outpaces your earnings. Courtesans harbour their own hidden debts. The cost of powdered rouge to hide fatigue can be a shilling per application. A single bespoke gown from Paris, hued in sapphire or pearl white, might cost 15 sovereigns, a month's princely income sliced in one transaction. The cost of discretion often arrives as a private guard, an ex-policeman with a billy club at your service, charging half a sovereign per night to patrol hallways and safe stairs. Then come the unmeasured expenses, anxiety's toll on sleep, the price of secrecy that demands you hire boarding for a favourite confidant at 5 shillings a week, the whispered fines from matrons for late chapel attendance in reform homes, pennies punished in moral ledgers. The cost of empathy arises in clandestine donations, a streetwalker slipping half her bread to a neighbour in fever, a courtesan secretly funding a midwife to tend to a wounded comrade. These invisible transactions stitch solidarity into the statistics. Consider the long tail of medical debt. A bout of cholera can cost a streetwalker a guinea for basic attendance, a week's fortune. A courtesan's stint in a lock hospital under the Contagious Diseases Act demands not just treatment, but fines, bails, and bribes aggregating to 5 sovereigns. And this doesn't account for the cost of a reputation restored, payments to pamphleteers or bribed journalists burying scandals under rose-hued platitudes. In both worlds, the ledger is more than arithmetic. It is a ledger of vulnerability. Each coin pocketed becomes a lifeline or a noose. Every purchase of warmth, of silence, of a stolen hour's rest carries a hidden toll in dignity, freedom, and hope. In the end, freedom itself is a debt that can never be fully repaid. That takes us to the end of tonight's journey through the alleys and salons of Victorian London. If this story resonated, give the video a thumbs up and subscribe for more history's hidden corners. Drop a comment on what era or injustice you'd like me to explore next. Until then, rest easy and good night.